Welcome, everybody. I'm Robin Schwartz, Program and Grant Director of the Community Arts Partnership of Tompkins County. The Spring Rights Literary Festival is one of our many events and programs for the Tompkins County arts community and audiences. And if you want to check out the Community Arts Partnership website, I'm going to put it in the chat. You could see all the programs that we do. And if you're not on our mailing list, you can add yourself to the mailing list at the bottom of the homepage. The Spring Rights Literary Festival website, I will also put up. I know you've all seen it because you registered for this event. There are, what's today, Saturday? There's another event after this one, a reading called Life's a Joke, a reading to make you laugh if it doesn't make you cry. There are events tomorrow night, and then there are events next Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. And then there are there's 8 writing workshops that happen from December through March. I want to thank our sponsors, our very generous sponsors and much appreciated sponsors, especially this year. Ithaca College, Wegmans, M&T Bank, the Odyssey Bookstore, and the Ithaca Marriott. We also get funding from New York State Council on the Arts and Poets and Writers. If you'd like to support the Community Arts Partnership and everything that we do with our tiny staff, I am 50% of our staff, that would be amazing. It's support not only for the festival, but for everything that we do. And any amount is great. And I'm going to put the link in the chat. So a couple of things. You are all going to be on mute throughout the event, except for the panel. And use chat. I love chat. I love to see comments coming in, questions that you may have. If you have any questions, you can send them to me. You can, if you haven't used chat before, you can send private messages to people or just address everybody. So definitely let's have fun with the chat. So without further ado, we'll start our event, and I'm going to turn the program over to Joan Marcus.
Right. Thank you, Robin. Yeah, I just thank you so much. I want to thank everyone who has worked on Spring Rights this year, Jen Tennant as well. I know how much work goes into an event like this, and it's just, I'm just so glad that we get to do this. And thanks so much to Eleanor Henderson and Nick Kowalczyk for being with me today. I wanted to get this panel together because as someone who is working on a memoir about something in my life that isn't over, that wasn't like done and dusted 25 years ago, and it's still like a major force and tension and problem in my life, I think a lot about how to write a story while I'm living it. Eleanor and Nick are also working on memoirs about things that aren't necessarily only in the past, that may be part of their present lives. And I am looking forward to hearing them read and to discussing this with them. And we're going to read first. I think we will each be reading for maybe about 10 minutes or a little less than 10 minutes. And then we're going to chat for a little while. And then I think there will be time, hopefully, to maybe even take questions. So Eleanor is going to go first. Eleanor Henderson is the author of the novels The 12 Mile Strait and 10,000 Saints, and the forthcoming memoir, Everything I Have Is Yours. She teaches in the Department of Writing at Ithaca College.
Thanks, Joan. Can everybody see me and hear me?
Yep.
Thank you, Joan, for inviting me to do this panel with you and Nick. And thanks, Robin and Jen and everybody else behind the scenes for making this happen. When Joan and I and Nick started talking about this to begin with, this was still a book that was very much in progress, but it turns out I've just turned it in. I'm done. So this is my celebratory reading. Thank you for being here with me to mark this event that this is now no longer crafting the life in progress. But while I was working on this book, it very much was a matter of, writing the days that I was moving through. This is a memoir about illness and marriage. And I'm going to be reading a chapter that's about 100 pages in or so. A bit of a content warning. It's mostly about illness, pretty intense illness, physical illness, but also mental illness, touches briefly on suicide and addiction. It also contains some badly pronounced French. When cancer returns to the body, when the old cancer cells you thought had been killed hadn't been killed, it's called a recurrence. With autoimmune diseases, when the symptoms come back, it's called a flare-up or a flare. Which is the weird disease your husband had? A cancer, a foreign invader, or is it his own body turning on itself? When you think that the weird disease that has almost ruined your husband has been killed, is capable of being killed, has been gone for a year, you imagine yourselves victors, survivors of a deadly combat. He runs the Ithaca Festival Mile with your 5-year-old, and he might as well be running a marathon, so healthy and handsome he looks in his black running tank, his toned biceps flashing down Cayuga Street. From the sidelines, you cheer like a soccer mom. When the disease has been killed not through radiation or chemotherapy, but through some murky combination of luck and will and alcohol, you both remain, even in remission, in submission to the fickle beast, lest he wake from his cave. Be nice to your skin, pet it, moisturize, exfoliate, meditate, avoid stress, stay on program, pray to the beast. You cannot feed the beast alcohol anymore. The alcohol will kill your husband if the pain doesn't first. Was it ever really dead, or have the cells just been sleeping? One afternoon in 2014, at the end of that first year of recovery, that long, lovely pink cloud, your husband will have to make a phone call. He has to call a doctor's office and make an appointment. You go out, he stays home. He finds that he can't do it. He finds himself locked in the bathroom with his phone in his hand, panicked. He paces, he sweats. When you come home, he emerges from the bathroom, and the sores on his forearms, the ones that had faded to scars the camouflage color of chewed bubblegum, are on fire. A flare. The blood has bloomed to the surface. He walks out of the bathroom like a zombie, arms floating in front of him like they belong to someone else. He walks out of the bathroom like Teen Wolf. The transformation is that swift, that complete. No, you say. No, 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 no. You'd been on guard for the return of the wrong monsters. It was suicide you were worried about, and alcohol, relapse. Your army was divided, weakened. While you weren't looking, the other beast has awoken. It's the beast's fault, and yet it's your husband who has called him back. This is the way you see it. This is where your fear goes. It fights, it blames. How not to blame your husband when it lives inside him? What's so hard about making a fucking phone call, and how does it lead to this? There's nothing to be done. Keep coming back to the rooms. Buy him the apricot exfoliating soap he likes. Cry. His skin boils and bakes and heals. It feels like things are crawling inside it, he says. It goes away for a few weeks, and then it flares again, recurs. He had a breakout, is how you put it to the doctors, to friends, which makes him sound like a teenager with unfortunate acne. You go to the internet. You've searched for rash, skin disease, lesions. Scrolling the images is like playing a slot machine, pulling the handle and begging for the symbols to line up. No matches. Except there they are again, the pictures of Morgellons disease, the same chocolate chip pattern of lesions across a forearm. You recognize them the way you'd recognize the pattern of freckles on your child's face. I'm going to skip over, but quickly summarize a scene where I go to a literary festival and meet the writer Leslie Jameson and read and struggle with her essay, The Devil's Bait, which is about Morgellons disease, which is a highly controversial diagnosis that Erin and I were considering at this point, but had dismissed. So in this essay, Jameson reports on a Morgellons conference, a conference for patients. And this essay at first like gave me hope in legitimizing this disease. But then by the end of the essay, it becomes clear to me that she's actually dismissing this disease, and many doctors, researchers dismiss this disease instead diagnosing patients with delusional parasitosis. So in this essay, I'm introduced to this concept of folie à deux, which is the clinical name for shared delusions, or madness of two, which is actually the name of this chapter. Neglected to say that, madness of two. It went on like that for months, years, believing, not believing, hoping, not hoping, praying, not praying. Could my whole life up to this point be captioned, not praying? When I didn't need to pray, when the curse lifted, I stood and ceased praying. I believed when I needed to believe. One night, Aaron woke me in the middle of the night, absolutely certain that he knew what was wrong with his skin. He'd been up for days, unable to sleep, his arms and legs sleeved with a fiery rash. What is it? I asked. Scabies. His laptop lay open, the keyboard wet with droplets of his sweat. I put on my glasses and studied the images of the blood-colored bugs on the screen. Mites, parasitic mites, they're burrowed in my skin. His voice was shrill with panic and delight. They've been laying eggs under my skin. I looked between the screen and the shin he'd thrust in front of my face. Look, see them moving? I thought I maybe saw something moving, or was it the light? I don't know, babe. It was hard to tell. He couldn't sit still. All this time, scabies, he laughed. The mange. He was almost joyous. Maybe it was that joy I wanted to believe in, the allure of identifying a foreign invader, the warm relief of trusting my husband. He was as confident as a general with binoculars watching the enemy march in. It's highly contagious, he said. It's a miracle the kids haven't gotten it. I looked down at my left forefinger, which the day before had sprouted a ridge of white, itchy bumps. Did they look mite-shaped? I could practically feel my guard falling, our minds fusing as I stepped over to the other side. All this time, he'd been not infected, but infested. Aaron's regular GP, Dr. Das, wasn't available the next day, so we saw a nurse practitioner who looked skeptically at Aaron's shins. She didn't see any evidence of mites, but to be on the safe side, she prescribed permethrin cream. You'll both have to do a full treatment, she said, just in case. I nodded my head as though accepting my religious duty. Before we left, I asked her, can you please give him something to sleep? That night, we stripped down to our underwear and painted our bodies with insecticide, neck to toes. We laughed, squirmed. It was a science experiment, a mating ritual. Aaron took one of the Ambien he'd been prescribed. Carefully, we lay ourselves down on the clean sheets, palms to the ceiling, sunbathers slathered in holy oil. We waited for the rapture. We waited to be transformed. My friend Anna had once taken half an Ambien, and it had knocked her out so completely that she woke up the next morning on the bathroom floor. My husband, he didn't sleep one wink that night. I slept, but woke up sticky with confusion and shame. What had I just done? Had it worked? I remembered the line from The Devil's Bait. That should be obvious by now. My husband was still my husband, moody and sleepless and in pain. I took a shower. The next week, when his rash had not healed, he went back to the doctor's office and saw Dr. Das. He pointed to the bug crawling in the sore on his shin. Dr. Das looked at him and said with absolute certainty, there are no bugs in your skin. Oh, Aaron said. Folie à deux, it means literally madness of two. I'd done more research on folie à deux after reading about it in The Devil's Bait. In the mid-19th century, two French physicians had identified two kinds. Folie simultanée is when two people, each vulnerable to psychosis, simultaneously undergo a similar delusion. The other, folie imposée, is when one person, the inducer, undergoes a delusion and imposes it on another person, the acceptor. Without the inducer, the acceptor would not have been susceptible to delusion. She consents to madness. Perhaps every marriage is a madness. To agree to see the world the way another sees the world, what is that vow but a shared delusion? When I rinsed my body of that insecticide, though, I stepped back onto the other side and I left Aaron there alone. No matter how much he showered, he could not wash off the evidence of his folly. Thanks. Okay, so it's my pleasure now to introduce my friend and colleague, Nick Kowalczyk. He earned an MFA in nonfiction from the University of Iowa. For the last 12 years, he's taught journalistic and autobiographical nonfiction at Ithaca College and published essays in Salon.com, LitHub, and Phoebe, among other places. The memoir he's working on is tentatively titled We Were a Family. Please welcome Nick.
Hello. Thanks, Eleanor. Can folks hear me? Yeah, okay. First, I want to thank Joan for organizing the panel and inviting me to be on it. And to Robin, I know you said that this was not that hard to organize, but I can't imagine all of the technological things that had to be done to coordinate this. So thank you. So as Eleanor said, I'm working on this memoir I'm calling We Were a Family. I think as it'll become clear in what I'm reading, I tend to think of this as a kind of act of reparation, reparation of kind of broken family narrative, reparation of a kind of broken sense of identity. The part I'm going to read is from an area called Origins, toward the beginning. Just as far as content goes, sexual violence does come up in this portion. I suspect I know more about my origins than most people. Date of conception, circumstances of conception, etc. Most of what I know I had to figure out for myself. As a result, I still consider myself a reporter, even though my subject these last several years has been my own life, which may sound prickish, as if I've spent my days navel-gazing and picking at the lint of my own life experience. The opposite is actually true. Most of my life, I have felt like a foreigner to myself, a foreigner within my family, my hometown, and my country too, which in order to keep myself going led me to look into the lives of other people, including the distant and the dead, to make more acceptable having to look at myself. Plus, I liked the vacation from my own existence qualities of the work. The best thing about reporting for me was the cultivated loneliness. You always were standing on the outside of something, even yourself. Of course, it was an experience of psychic fracturing. How couldn't it have been? I was a human being attempting the impossible feat of resisting the pull of human emotions, but I was raised to be a master of repression. When a police scanner sends you to the scene of a fatal car wreck in which the mother of 2 elementary school-aged children has died, you do your best to glimpse beyond the body and the blood in her vehicle and jot down the sheriff's official statements of causation in a notebook illuminated by the turning lights of red and blue. You compartmentalize yourself too later on those nights when you knock on the door of the newly widowed husband, take a breath, and hope he won't shoo you away as some kind of vulture. As a reporter, you teach yourself to tilt toward practicality once you hear the latch turn. Hello, you say, my name is Nick Kowalczyk and I'm a reporter. I'm very sorry for your loss and I'm sure you don't want me here, but tomorrow there will be a story about your wife's accident. Her name will appear. I am here only to ask if there is anything you would like said about her, who she was, what she meant to those who loved her, and how she will be missed. I began practicing unpleasant aspects of inquiry like these when I was 18 years old. They did not feel to me unfamiliar, as my life had felt out of joint for as long as I could remember. If anything, in a roundabout way, the art of reporting taught me how to confront my own life with a degree of clarity and responsibility. The practice of investigating events in which some people were hurt and others were incautious about the damage their actions could inflict upon others. All of life is like this. All of one's life, if one chooses, can be an attempt to uncover and repair what is broken. Right now, I am studying my mother's old calendars, which she gave me to assist my current investigation into the abject circumstances of my origins, something I learned about September 3rd, 2016, when I was 36 years old. It's a story that came to light only because I took a DNA test to fact-check my parents' claims of my Polish ancestry and my whiteness. The test results led my mother to reveal her greatest secret, that her husband, my dad, was not my biological father, and that I wasn't really an exotic-looking Polish American, presumably descended from ancient Asiatic conquerors, as I nearly had convinced myself into believing throughout 3 decades of inadvertently passing as white. The truth was that I really am Asian American, just as I appear, and that according to my mother, on February 21st, 1979, a man I have never met, who also happened to be of Filipino descent, forced himself onto her. This was how I ended up being the outsider child in an otherwise homogenous white family in working class Ohio, raped into being and raised inside of a terrible secret. At my house in Ithaca, when Mom made this full disclosure, the teaser was over a text sent from Ohio. She made a reference to the memoir I had been struggling to write for the previous 10 years in futile effort to make sense of my identity. "I guess you have another chapter to write now," Mom remarked the night she told me all of that. I was speechless. "I think that's more than a chapter, Joan," my wife Jen, sitting beside me, replied on my behalf. "Yeah," Mom sighed, bobbing her head back and forth. On February 21st, 1979, Mom worked 2 shifts for the hospital, the first one in the morning and the second one in the evening as an on-call nurse. Throughout my childhood up until I was 8 years old, I recall Mom working on-call shifts, but never on the same day she already worked. I wonder if February 21st, 1979 was the only day she ever did this, the first and the last, as she always had been good at finding a way to be thrifty and prepared, which I think is why she sought out the second shift when a plastic surgeon on an earlier day invited her to his talk about the craniofacial repair of burn victims. At that time, Mom was new at the hospital and had worked in the plastic surgeon's operating room, but did not really know him per se. She also saw her attendance as an excuse to switch on-call schedules, thereby working the double on February 21st and enjoying an extra weekend with Dad, who hated when she worked during what he considered their time. A win-win, she might have told herself. Mom never remembered much else of the talk, however. As a listener of talks throughout the rest of her life, especially self-help talks, most of them related to building one's self-esteem, Mom was someone who preferred stories of hope, inspiration, and the overcoming of adversity. She liked talks by speakers who told harmless jokes, were self-effacing, shared touching personal stories, and attempted to communicate greater truths about the world as gleaned from experience. So I bet she spent the talk as any new surgical nurse would, trying to discern what this particular surgeon cared about so as to lessen the chance of aggravating a tender ego. I don't know how it happened that Mom and the plastic surgeon spoke after his talk. Maybe she thanked him for inviting her. Maybe he approached her, since her attendance had been about his desire. Either way, he expressed another desire. "Come to my office," he told Mom. He said there was something that pertained to his talk that she simply must see. By now, Mom had been working for at least 9 hours. She declined, saying she had to get home. He urged it wouldn't take long. Maybe she said it would be out of her way. Maybe he asked where she lived. If this happened, he likely would have told Mom to take another route home of equal time and distance, Lorraine being a medium small place with his office on Oberlin Avenue anyway, accessible to everything. I presume they drove in separate cars. I imagine it was dark and February cold, with the winds from Lake Erie blowing damp or sharp. At his office building, he turned on the lights, led her to his private office, and closed the door. The next thing she knew, he was all over her. She recalled to me, when it was over, he pointed to the door, turned to me and said, "There's a bathroom out there where you can clean up." It was not one of Mom's habits to drive quickly. In my experience, whenever she felt distressed, she continued doing things at a moderate pace or slower, while at the same time slack-eyed and distracted, as if she had just given up hope of finding her way out of a hologram. By now, it would have been maybe 7 or 8 p.m. On the living room television would have been either 8 is Enough or Roots. Dad could have been napping on the plaid couch. Aunt Joan probably sat opposite him on the brown leather recliner. Mom, shaken, would have entered the house through the kitchen. 37 years later, Mom considered it impressive that despite Dad and her living with Aunt Joan at the time of her assault, plus 5 years more, and 3 more decades of close regular contact with our family, including every vacation we took, the assault was known about only by her and Dad. "Wow, we were really good at keeping a secret," she remarked to me after having told all of our family about her assault and my real parentage, and everyone having expressed shock. I, however, attribute their success, if that is the word for it, less to my parents' stealth than their incapacity for intimacy and vulnerability with each other and within themselves. They spoke of the assault once, the night it happened, and never again. I don't know exactly what she told Dad that night, but I suspect it was in the privacy of their bedroom, the only room in the house they had to themselves. "Who is this son of a bitch?" Dad asked her. "I'm going to kill him." It was a response that suggests he believed her, that he did not immediately look for or invent ways that Mom, even unconsciously, might have encouraged the surgeon to do what he did. I love him for that. Mom did not tell Dad the surgeon's name. I do not know how many times he asked for it, nor why Mom refused to give it. One possibility is that she thought Dad would make true on his claim. He would kill the guy, probably shoot him, with either his .22 pistol or .22 rifle, and then where would they be? Or maybe she wanted to save Dad the embarrassment of knowing the doctor's name and seeing Mom as a person to be protected and a possession to be claimed as his own, and yet likely not killing the surgeon and not beating him up either. Maybe she thought too, if unconsciously, about the social dynamics at play. Dad was white, the surgeon was Filipino. Dad was native born, the surgeon was an immigrant. They were working class and powerless, the surgeon made money. She was just a nurse, and the surgeon belonged to what the white nurses called the pineapple mafia of Filipino doctors who seemed to get from Lorraine's 2 hospitals whatever they wanted, which for the plastic surgeon apparently included her too. What would be the use realistically of doing or saying anything? "No, you're not going to kill him," she told Dad. And with those words, the matter was supposed to have been silenced forever. There's enough in that story to haunt me forever, I think. I hope that it doesn't always. But there's one thing in particular about that night that socks me like a gut punch. And it's something I imagine, too. Something I bring to the story after having wondered for much of my life whether I was to blame somehow for the unhappiness of our family. It is the image of Mom and Dad lying together in their bed after they have said their last words. I see them as if I am in the room but invisible. The blinds are half closed and the moon and a street lamp partially illuminate their distant bodies on the double bed. He pretends to sleep. Her eyes are open and vacant. Their bodies are not touching. Each of them in their own way needs comfort, especially her, and they want to talk to each other, to say something. Anything, anything, anything to fix this and make it better. But neither of them knows how to take the initiative. The silence between them remains, it grows, and for the rest of their marriage, at least the next 37 years, the silence transmogrifies and becomes its own life force. And here is how it happens every time in my imagination, like a Freudian fever dream of unconscious inherited guilt. She rolls on her side to look at him. He keeps his eyes closed, doesn't know what to say. And in the embittered tension that already exists between them, a new separation begins to grow, and it is me. Thanks for listening. The next reader is Joan Marcus, who coordinated the panel. Joan Marcus teaches fiction and narrative nonfiction in the Department of Writing at Ithaca College. Her stories and essays appear in The Sun, Fourth Genre, the Georgia Review, Alaska Quarterly Review, the Smart Set, and elsewhere. Avoidant type, her memoir in progress tells the story of her battle with medical anxiety.
Thank you, Nick, and thanks to you and to Eleanor for doing this with me and for reading your incredible work. So as Nick said, my memoir is called Avoidant Type, and it has kind of 2 threads to it. One is the thread that's in the present, in scare quotes, which is about me trying to work through my avoidant type illness anxiety disorder, which keeps me away from doctors. And the other part has to do with my past and with my mother, who had a severe anxiety disorder, was on an antipsychotic for 20 years, and eventually, and there may be a connection there, eventually got ALS and died. So I'm sort of weaving both of those threads together. I thought for this panel, I would read a little section from the present, since it's the present that I'm trying to work through in terms of getting over something. So I'm going to read about a time when I decided to get hypnosis for my medical anxiety. It actually did some very interesting things. For those of you who don't know, hypnosis, it really is like a sort of deep meditation and creative visualization. It's not like, I wasn't, in the sunken place or anything like that. So this is what happened when I got that hypnosis. Candace takes me down a long escalator, 10 flights into deep meditation. This is creative visualization, and I should be good at it. Every day I imagine all sorts of things in vivid detail, the raw itch of cancer crawling on my skin, my daughters hiding in closets from active shooters. So why is this so hard? My escalator floats at first through the atrium of a vast mall, but what mall have I ever been in with 10 levels? I shift to a hotel, one of those opulent places with glass capsule elevators rocketing up 50 flights and escalators purring on the lower levels. Escalators require a bit of walking between levels, though. You need to swing around to catch the next one on the other side. When should I be walking? And when am I sailing between flights? When am I hustling to the other side? I shouldn't hustle. Maybe I should float instead down a dim hall, ghosting past locked doors, over garish hotel carpet. Going down to the 8th floor, deeper into relaxation, Candace murmurs. But I'm not sure I'm there yet. I'm a person who needs to be convinced. Inaccurate details make me click off the set or slam the book shut. Why wouldn't I hold my own imagination to the same standards? I can feel my heart chuffing away, too fast for hypnosis, distracting me with the fear that none of this is going to work. Let it be, I tell myself. Whatever happens, happens. Level 6, level 5, level 4. I try to imagine each flight getting dimmer, taking me below ground to the bowels of the hotel where doors open into secret rooms and memories skulk in the shadows. When I'm all the way down on the bottom floor, Candace asks me to imagine myself in a place of perfect peace and relaxation. So now I'm leaving the hotel, I guess, which is okay. I never quite had that place figured out. I take myself to the state forest near my house, a trail overlooking a steep ravine I've walked a dozen times, mossy trunks, ferns lush under the canopy, a stream rushing over rocks far below. I've done this before, imagined a peaceful place as a way of calming myself, but maybe that business with the escalator made it a little easier. Candace has me describe what I like about my place, and I avoid the impulse to overthink it. Green, I say, light through the trees. Joan, do you believe in any sort of higher power? She murmurs. Ah, shit. I hate that question. It always seems intrusive. In my family, faith was something you came to privately and without fanfare, if you came to it at all. It was sort of like masturbation, a matter between you and your own fundament, highly personal and sort of embarrassing. We were never observant, invoked Christ and hell as expletives without a second thought, yet there was never talk of atheism either. Shortly before her death, my grandmother told my mother that she believed in God. Mom admitted the same thing to me briefly and privately toward the end of her life. Faith is possible, that's the message I got, but unless you're near death, for God's sake, keep that shit to yourself. I don't know, I say. So Candace doesn't tell me that God is holding me in his loving embrace or whatever. Instead, it's the universe shining its warmth through the trees. I tell myself, go with it. I'm too desperate to be cynical. 30 plus years of feeling convinced the next bad thing is right around the corner. Now someone wants to give me a little peace, and I'm tripping myself up with metaphysical semantics. Candace takes me from that green place on a quick tour of my worst moments of dread, skimming through those nights when I panicked over a raw tongue or a bloodshot eye. We settle, finally, on a memory I haven't probed in years. I'm 28 and still living in Tucson, recently married, a newly minted Master of Fine Arts, scraping up a living teaching international students at a community college. My stomach hurts all the time. Low down near the appendix, a raw, bloated feeling like there's something growing in there. I have medical insurance I can barely afford, so I see a young man named Dr. Bolger with big, aggressive teeth. He presses on my belly cautiously, then orders a blood draw and a stool sample. Could be giardia, he suggests. Don't you get that from drinking out of streams, I ask. Or from restaurants, he tells me. Seriously? I eat $3 burritos from El Rapido all the time, but something tells me Bolger is dead wrong here. And indeed, my sample comes back negative for giardia. My white count is fine too, so no appendicitis, though Bolger orders another test just to be sure. That should be my cue to ditch him, find a better doctor who doesn't run the same panels when they don't tell him enough the first time. But I'm young and I don't know my rights, and my gut still hurts, a round ache that sometimes stretches all the way to my lower back. There's a mass in there. I'm pretty sure it's a mass. Is the pain enough to wake you up at night? My brother-in-law's wife wants to know. She's a nurse at the National Institutes of Health in Bethesda. She's asking the right question. The pain is actually pretty subtle, something I could ignore entirely if I weren't scared to death. That should be my cue, my second cue to ditch Bolger. But by now I've already gone back for a third visit, and he's taken a urine sample and discovered that I have a trace of protein in my piss, which means I'm passing blood. You have a kidney stone, he crows, triumphant. Shouldn't that hurt like hell? Like being cut with a knife? He shrugs, not always. He writes a prescription for Vicodin, which I fill but never use, and he orders an intravenous pyelogram. This involves injecting dye into my veins to make the kidneys and ureters visible for imaging. The IV piece sucks. I'm cold and I'm scared, and the veins in my arms are damn near invisible. The nurse digs around with her needle to insert the IV, first in one arm, then the other, and I end up with big smeary bruises on the bend of both elbows. I don't want to think about the dye in my system either, or the radiation near my ovaries, or whether all this might be entirely unnecessary. The IVP comes back negative. You must have passed the stone, Bolger tells me. But wait, wouldn't that have hurt like crazy? Not necessarily. He tests my urine again. Still a trace of protein. Years later, I learned from my midwife that some women always have a trace of protein in their urine. For now, it seems like proof positive that something is wrong, something maddeningly undetectable. I'm so nervous I can't eat. At my last visit, I was down to 106, and the pain is still there, vague, gnawing. Sick women live forever, my friend Becky tells me, right? That's what Marquez said. We're in my living room and I'm trying a little sweet potato soup, spooning it up timidly, a woman afraid of her own body. Marquez said that? In Love in the Time of Cholera. It's a misogynist sentiment if ever I heard one, should offend the hell out of me, but for some reason I find it comforting. I'm one in a long line of sick women. We'll outlast the apocalypse, insects we with our chitinous shells, our brave armor of illness. I'm going to stop there. So, I have questions. Nick actually addressed this a little bit in the beginning of his reading, talking about being trained as a reporter and then reporting on one's own life. And I was, I don't know, I was hoping the two of you, and I can maybe add something to it as well, could talk about talk a little bit more about that, that sort of, I don't know, it's almost like a kind of double life experience where you are simultaneously living your life and also thinking about the book that you are writing about your life. What is that like, and how do we negotiate that?
Nick, do you want to take it?
I mean, it's weird. I guess. I think what is it like?
Corey just said it's the writer's condition. So true.
Yeah. I mean, I think, yeah, in any case, you're sort of looking and wondering, like, is that material? You know, when something has happened. is that, I think about a moment that I have in my mind of like an endpoint for this thing that occurred. That doesn't, life goes on. But it suggests a moment of closure for the story that I'm trying to tell, but not my life,
Yeah.
and I'll still bungle in the way I bungle going forward. But for purposes of this thing, the story, it's different. And I think that I don't know that I have like, when I look at old family photographs, which I do a lot, when I train through different, I know I'm going to write about when I'm 5, let's say. So I gather up all the old family photographs from when I'm 5, I look at them differently than I did before from the new lens. But I think I still feel everything I felt, but I'm just trying to figure out what it is I'm feeling.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I relate to that. The question that you posed about, when does the story end, is a question that I think everyone who writes memoir has to answer. But for books like ours, where we're still sort of living through, finding the end becomes a sort of, the narrative that you're living through. And for me, it was sometimes a comfort and sometimes just really trippy, and sometimes, its own kind of painful experience. I remember, one very intense moment where Aaron was, having a sort of psychotic break. He was shouting at me, I think I have the end for your book, because we had been living through it. And it had become a kind of reality in our house that we were sort of trying to survive the present by, I was trying to survive the present by writing about it. Again, on some days it was a comfort, and on other days it was just very weird to, be having an intense experience and to have another part of your brain going like, well, this is definitely a chapter. And so like your reporter's nose sort of identifying story, doesn't take a lot sometimes. And then for me, there was this other weird layer of like, well, does that mean I'm using my husband's agony for this material? Because, when you're writing about someone else's pain, it's always complex. So, but there are a lot of layers.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm glad that both of you talked about the endings to your books, because that's the thing that that really twists me into knots. I know Eleanor, having read a draft of your amazing memoir, I know. You come to a very beautiful ending there, but I have to think at some point in the middle of the writing process, you had to not know how it was going to end. It's interesting to me to hear that Nick sort of has an end point in mind for the book, which is great. I have no bloody idea myself. So I don't know. Eleanor, did you feel at a certain point when you were in the middle, like, I don't know how the heck this is going to end?
For sure. Like, I kept hoping, that it would reveal itself to me. I have these 2 threads as well, sort of like you do, Joan, as you know. So there's a sort of backstory of my 23-year relationship with Aaron, which I thought of as the history. And then I had this, this front story, which I'm thinking of as the mystery. And I just, kept on hoping that the mystery would solve itself. But I could go back, on days where it was too intense, and go back and work on those older chapters, which I like had more control over. But, it was actually you and your excellent reading of my book that helped me to see, and I don't think I'm spoiling anything, that even though the front story, the mystery isn't really resolved, that the backstory, the history, the love story is resolved. And that is where I sort of surprised myself. So, and another thing that helped me to end the book, even though I probably would have ended it, the same time that I ended it, was the pandemic, actually, was being able to see Aaron's very individual experience of illness against the perspective of this, global health crisis. So I was, surprised. by that, but also helped to give me some shape.
Yeah, yeah, wow. Yeah, that's yeah, that's amazing. Yeah, I what you were saying about having those two threads and being able to go to that past thread when the present was too intense, I can very much relate to that. When I feel like we're not dealing with this right now, then I get the little trip into the past. Nick, do you I don't know, do you have any experience like that, or like how have you been jumping all around? Have you been going kind of in a sort of a chronological order?
I think mostly I hide from the project in total candor, and then I lean into it. But I've been trying to move in a chronological order, just sort of very deliberately moving through time with this other, with the my childhood thread moving forward, and then this sort of like meta commentary
Mhm.
thread happening along the way. But on the point of what's present and what's past, and some of the stuff that you guys were just talking about. So, it was actually in the midst of the pandemic, when COVID began, and everything was so out of control and so out of whack, and the I don't think anti-Asian racism ever really went away, but when it really reared its head again, and I felt so powerless and so horrified and so brought back to childhood, being like the only Asian kid on the playground, and very, very stark memories of that time period. That was when I decided that I was going to hide in the memoir rather than hide from the memoir, because there was so much uncertainty with COVID, and just what was happening now, like never knowing when I go to Wegmans, what is there going to be a problem, and talking to other folks and hearing about what was happening to them. The memoir ended up being like a place where I actually could exert some control, I realized, or at least feel like I had control in a way that my present life did not. And that was awesome. That was an awesome feeling.
Right. That's it's amazing to hear you say that. I mean, I think that is a kind of ideal where we, I don't know, that a memoir allows us to make sense of our lives, and to exert that control. I think for me, that's in some ways my struggle, that I want it. I want the memoir to help me make sense of things, and I know it will eventually. But at a certain point, you are just very much at sea with it, and you have to kind of say, I know if I keep working on it, I will be able to make sense of things. But maybe not today. I don't know. We have just a couple of minutes. Robin, we are able to take questions, aren't we? Is that people can?
Yes, if anyone has any questions, please just put them in the chat, and you all can see them. And I don't think we have any yet. There's often a lot of comments, but not so many questions.
Yeah.
So,
I'm glad you found the material funny, Corey. I find that's, for me, that's kind of the only thing that I can do with this material is to make it funny, because otherwise it's just going to seem like I'm doing some sort of, woe is me. I don't know. If I don't make it funny, I feel like I'm just worrying about my worrying, and that's not fun. So
We have a question.
yeah, how do you navigate memoir and your relationship with the people you're writing about? Whoa, that's so hard.
yeah.
Do we have another hour, or?
What? So, yeah, I know, right. I mean, my parents are dead. And that is, I chickened out and waited until my father had died before writing this. So take it away, guys.
Man. Well, I'll just say briefly that Aaron gave me his blessing to write this book and also has not read it. So he gave me a kiss before I left to come back to campus to do my reading today and said, have a great reading. And, you know, I hold out hope that one day he will, but you know, it's so complicated. I mean, even the minor characters in my book. Now I said that I'm done, but actually I have to start the really difficult work, which is reaching out to all of those people to talk about, you know, do you want your name changed? And are you okay with me including this and that? It's a big part of it that, you know, when Nick says he hides from the project, I'm definitely hiding from that part of the project.
Yeah.
So it's challenging for sure.
I think it's been maybe 3 years since I made the mistake of showing anything that I've been writing to anybody that is involved. And it was not, it was an essay that I published that involved this subject matter and the story of how I found out. And I shared it with my mother and I shared it with my brother. And both reactions were, I think they fit the bill with the sort of family that we have, which is a sort of non-family family. And I decided that I wasn't going to let those silences get in my way. So I just sort of plow ahead. You know, to the point I even just took my Facebook account down a couple weeks before this so that any mention of my name on that social media forum wouldn't be noticed by anyone in my family. But that is what I do. I just want to write it and try to tell the truth for myself and then figure things out. I ask questions. They folks know I'm working on stuff, but I don't want anyone else's silences to lead me to be silent, I guess.
Yeah, there is an extent to which you have to just be very thick-skinned about it. I did start writing about this stuff before my father died, and about 5 years before he died, not writing the whole memoir, but writing some essays. And one was, the first one that I ever published was about how he and my mother were complicit in, well, he was complicit in allowing my mother to drive when she was sick and paralyzed and everything. And I never showed it to him, and they wanted me to show it to him. The editors at the Sun wanted me to do that because the whole James Fry debacle had just happened, and I wouldn't. I said I was going to, and then I just didn't show it to him. So there's something to be said for that as well. There was another question. Have any of you ever approached a project which incorporates both memoir and fiction, like two threads that weave together? Eleanor is both a fiction writer and a memoirist. Would you ever consider doing that?
I mean, I suppose, like, you know, a lot of fiction that I write and probably a lot of folks write, there's that sort of, you know, memoir invisibly hiding. But
Yes.
not intentionally, you know, as a sort of genre experiment. Sounds interesting.
Yeah, that would be cool. Yeah, that's been my experience as well. Sorry, Nick.
I have not, mostly because like as I did in the thing that I read, like I really like trying to inhabit speculation as like another space, because I think that that's part of where my imagination goes, and I want to represent that. So that's sort of how I handle the parts that I don't know where something happened. I just speculate.
Yeah. I guess we're out of time. Yeah, we're at 6:54.
Yep, there's another event right at 7, and that we hope everybody stays put for the next event. We do have a couple of minutes, so if anyone else wants to answer that last question.
Yeah, the memoir and the, I mean,
The memoir and the, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I have also written both fiction and memoir. And like Eleanor, I find that when I write fiction, there's definitely a lot of me in it, a lot of, sort of, yeah, memoir hiding as fiction. And then when I write memoir, like Nick, I also have those speculative moments, those moments when I'm imagining things, and then those moments when I am piecing together things from the past, when I'm imagining my mother's life. I mean, I'm definitely using a lot of fiction in my memoir as well. But I think that that's just the sort of fiction writing that all memoirists do. And also it's the sort of memoir writing that many fiction writers do. I think that's just sort of a natural interweaving of the two genres that just kind of happens. Yeah. Any other questions? Thank you all for being here.
Thank you so much for that. That was really wonderful.